Houston is kind of like a river where you've got a lot of streams that come together and make it what the river is that we know it. Kind of started back in the 1990s with a thing called Mission Houston. And Jim Harrington, as the director of the Union Baptist Association at the time, really took on the model and the passion around getting the church engaged in the community and taking that missional mindedness and making it practical and tangible and something that is identifiable. Kind of taking the church out of the Sunday morning time slot and making more of the 24/7 church like back in the first century, and how it engaged the community every step along the way. And Sunday morning was just another little iteration of the convening the body together, whereas it was in practice within the community throughout the rest of the time. That came along with City Fest, and Kevin Palau energized a lot of passionate people in the various sectors of the community, David Weekley, Bob McNair, just to throw a couple of big names around, and some of the bigger churches, and really getting missional minded around what would look like if the church was engaged within the community. A lot of the church school service works began at that particular time, and it really grew, and it was kind of this fabric of the community throughout that time. 2012, Tom Billings was tasked with he's the director of the Union Baptist Association, was tasked with hosting the Southern Baptist Convention coming to Houston in 2013. And typically what they would do is to have a outreach and service component of that convention. And that just wasn't good enough for Tom. He just said, this is a time for all Houstonians to come, and at this precipitous time, to engage the community and to take on lostness by being the hands and feet of Jesus. And if we said it once, we said it 100, perhaps 1,000 times. And Jesus went about doing good. And his model of doing good was to, yes, tell about the kingdom and tell the good news of the kingdom, but he also took care of the physical needs. And so using that model propels the church to get engaged with the community. At that particular time, we said, well, it needs to be more than just these events. We need to have a more sustainable model for long-term relationship building and engagement within the community, rather than just the parachute church into that particular neighborhood. So Loving Houston Inc. was born at that particular time, and we adopted the model of Greater Houston being transformed by a loving church. That's our grand vision. That's something we aspire to do. That's what excites us when we get up in the morning to work, and how do we do about seeing this transformative work being done by the loving church. So in order to cast that model, we kind of looked at the opportunity around us and how do we fulfill that. And we kind of dived into and centered on the area of the children within Houston. Within Greater Houston area, there are 1.7 million children. Within Harris County, so we're drawing it in just a little tighter, that's 1.2 million. And 1 in 4 of those, or 300,000, are living at the poverty level or below. If you go within the city limits of Houston, so we're tracking a little bit closer down, that's 1 in 3. All right, 12,500 are homeless. That's the size of the city of Brenham, the Bluebell capital of the world. That whole city, represents a number of homeless children, and you can imagine the impact that has upon their social fabric and their educational needs as well. Drive it a little bit further within HISD, which is the largest independent school district within Houston, about 210,000 kids, 320 schools. 80% of those are economically disadvantaged. So between the below poverty level and just the next rung up, they're still economically disadvantaged. 80% of those, 62% are at risk, and half of that number will fulfill their destiny within that label and will drop out of high school. Only a 70% graduation rate. So that represents 60,000 kids that will be dropping out. And that's just one of the ISDs within Houston. Depending on what site you go to, but the most telling facts that we've found in the total all-in financial impact of a single dropout is $1.5 million over their lifetime. So that counts all of the incarceration, all of their drop in less wages, the revenues and tax revenue from that. Won't be owning a house, so that you won't have those property taxes generated. All that upon the society is $1.5 million. So within Houston, that number is $90 billion with a B. So if the facts, the cold hard facts of the statistics don't compel you, and the emotional hook on the heart with these compelling stories that come about, if I can hit you in the wallet, if I can drop to that base level and say, how can I protect this a little bit more? Think about that number there. So what we decided to do is to think about what the opportunity the church can engage within the school, and this quote keeps coming back, is the consistent, enduring presence of a caring adult. Makes all the world of difference. That's from the mentoring of fact. That's from no less an expert than Dr. Stephen Kleinberg from Rice University, the leading statistician, probably think tank all in one person. He says that you can take that to the bank. So we figure that this would be the idea that we could do, is to get the church involved in what we basically call is changing the trajectory of a child. I want you to do a little exercise with me. You can all stand up just for a second, okay? You've been sitting down for long enough, so stand up, hold your left hand out at this level. I want you to think about trajectory and trace with your left hand the trajectory of a rock. Throw a rock and picture with your hand what that trajectory of that rock being thrown is going to do. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to change that rock just for a little tiny bit. So hold it back out here. Now think about a rocket. And what's the trajectory of that? You bet. Okay, you will remember that illustration for the rest of your life. That is the potential that we have here. And change. You can sit back down. Changing the trajectory of that child, you're talking about a multi-generational change that we've done. So you take one child and you make your congregation makes a difference in changing that child from a potential dropout to now he graduates high school. What's the impact of that upon his children? They're going to be much more likely to graduate from high school and to go on and be a success in society, perhaps even going on to secondary education. And so then that grandchild also be much more likely to follow those steps. And so you see the impact of just that one child and within the community and the impact that it makes. That's the potential that we're talking about within the church. And so what we adopted in our mission to fulfill still that transformation vision that we're doing, we've just sharpened the focus about what makes the biggest difference and what's the most easily to engage the church. So we cast a vision for getting involved in changing the community. That's way too big. So if you start at the school, you start with a child, that's what we endeavor to do, is just to provide that motivation and the vision casting to help the church to serve the local school. And here's some of the impacts and some of the ways that they can do that. Probably the easiest and the most highest lever pull that we can make is in mentoring and in tutoring and literacy. Mentoring goes back to that consistent, caring presence of an adult, and to mold and to guide and to provide the bumpers to keep that child engaged all throughout school to make that difference. Tutoring and literacy, there's Untold Volumes talks about the effects of reading, particularly by the third grade, because early development through the third grade, you learn to read. Okay, and that's all about education, is about that. From that point on, a child reads to learn and must read to learn. There aren't any systemic and directional reading programs beyond the third grade. So if the child doesn't read at that level, they will increasingly and exponentially drop further and further behind until they decide, enough of this, I can go out and make more money selling drugs, and drop out of high school at an alarmingly shorter rate and earlier rate than ever before. So those two are just really, really key and critical. Teacher support, this comes the way of assistance and appreciation and just volunteering to help out the teachers in their day-to-day realm, just making their environment just a little bit more. Probably the two professions that are the least thought of and under-respected and underappreciated, law enforcement and teachers. I haven't had anybody argue that point with me before. Maybe Steve knows better, but I would say if you ask anybody, which institution would you, most likely not do, those two rank up there. So parental development is becoming an increasingly alarming point and element of if the teachers can't do everything, they have to have support at home, and particularly in an area that's surrounded perhaps by drugs, alcohol, language barriers, inconsistency, homelessness, you name it. All those things are a detriment to the child's education as well, that the church can stand in a place to directly impact. Facilities, renovation, beautification, untold stories about what difference that makes, not only within the school, but the teachers, the students, and going on to the community itself. Just being able to take care of that center of the community in such a way brings vibrancy and vigor to that community. And so as we say, this all grows up. We started with the funnel at the short end, short spot, with the child, and now we have grown to expand into areas of involvement and engagement, and now the church has more or less earned the right and earned the respect of the community because they've done nothing except look for after the welfare of the community with no agenda. And so now we can talk about really fantastic community development. We've had many churches that started out just here at a very small element and engaged in that school, and now has blossomed into its own nonprofit 501c3 to take on greater areas of human conditions and crisis points, and being able to funnel in volunteers and funds and resources around coming for the common good. So, what does Loving Houston offer in all of this? First of all, it's just the vision casting, just to be able to put that spark out there, put the idea up there. Here's a way to engage, okay? We think about this big thing of community development and transformation and taking on lostness, but we want to say, bring it down to a focal point of how we do that. So we offer training sessions on and just counseling folks about, it's not rocket science, but there are certainly some things you got to do and things you better not do. And so we'll provide all those best practices and building on the experiences and all the learnings that we've gathered on what's the best way to affect that model for engagement. Learning communities, out of the partnerships that we've discovered in Houston and those to come, is just being able to gather the representatives from the church and from the school together in a network and camaraderie and realizing that, hey, we're not the only fish in the pond. This feels pretty good. And learning to share from one another and building up that network. And finally, all kinds of references and valuable resources to go to. Because we realize in doing all this, there's potentially a pretty big paradigm shift that has to happen. And getting the church to come out of a survival mode or do all of its resources and all the activities around the members within the four walls to looking beyond the four walls. Unfortunately, a lot of Houston, with a lot of new churches, there are no four walls really. It's just like they're in the community, and this is a great thing. So why not serve there and to be able to affect the long-term missional outlook of the church itself. So that's what we're all about in being able to provide the voice, calling in the wilderness, but also say, here's how we do it, here's how we can help you, here's how you can guide from us. It's not our idea, it's not a new idea, but we feel like we got the single best place, and we'll build the single best place to come for everything you need to know about how to affect not only this small aspect of community development, but the community at large. So I think I've probably got about 60 seconds to answer any questions, or if that sparks an interest in you. Lovinghouston.net is our website. Yes?
Measuring impact.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it? Do you do it? How?
That's a great question. And it'd probably take longer than 60 seconds, but the soft answer is yes, we are going to measure it. We're going to be very careful, very prescriptive on what we can measure. Okay. The big thing is, and it's probably just being able to see and to recognize the value of kids that are excelling beyond what their former trajectory was going to be. Okay. And we'll let some of the hard metrics go as we can, and how other circumstances would address that as well.
Okay.
Okay.